The rain came down in steady sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning the streets of Brooklyn into rivers of gray. November had arrived with its typical melancholy, bringing cold winds that cut through jackets and the kind of damp chill that settled into your bones. The sky hung low and heavy, a blanket of clouds that seemed to press down on the city, muting colors and sounds until everything felt wrapped in cotton. Vincent Moretti watched the raindrops race down the tinted window of his black Mercedes as it glided through the streets of Bensonhurst. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades building something substantial. His salt and pepper hair was impeccably groomed, his charcoal suit tailored perfectly to his frame. He wore a wedding ring, a detail that meant something, even if his wife had passed 3 years ago. Some habits, some symbols you didn't abandon. "Traffic's light today, boss," Tony said from the driver's seat. Tony Rizzo had been driving for Vincent for 8 years. Reliable, steady, the kind of man who knew when to talk and when to stay quiet. Vincent nodded but didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, running through the afternoon's agenda. A meeting at 3 with the accountants, another at 5 with the suppliers. The usual dance of running a legitimate import business that generated enough money to keep questions at bay. His other ventures, the ones that operated in shadows, those required different meetings, different accountants, different kinds of conversations. But first, lunch. Every Tuesday for the past 2 years, Vincent ate lunch at Rosie's Diner on 18th Avenue. Routine was dangerous in his line of work. Predictability could get you killed, but some routines were worth the risk. Rosie's reminded him of simpler times, of the neighborhood before everything changed. The coffee was strong, the food was honest, and nobody bothered him there. In a life filled with calculated moves and careful words, Rosie's was one of the few places where Vincent Moretti could simply exist. The Mercedes pulled up outside the diner at exactly 12:47 p.m. Vincent appreciated punctuality. Time was the one commodity you couldn't buy more of, couldn't steal, couldn't negotiate. You either respected it or you wasted it. "Same drill," Vincent said, stepping out into the rain. He didn't bother with an umbrella for the 10 feet to the door. Tony nodded and pulled away to find parking. Marco and Sal, Vincent's security detail, were already there, having arrived 15 minutes earlier in a separate vehicle. They'd be seated at different tables, one near the front, one near the back. Close enough to respond, far enough away to maintain the illusion of normalcy. The bell above the door chimed as Vincent entered, and he was immediately enveloped by the warmth and noise of the diner. The smell hit him first. Coffee, bacon grease, toast, and something sweet. Pie, probably. The radio played quietly from somewhere behind the counter. Classic rock that was more texture than music. Conversations hummed from the scattered patrons. A construction crew in paint-splattered clothes. An elderly couple sharing a piece of cake. A woman typing furiously on a laptop while nursing a cup of tea. "Mr. Moretti," Rosie herself called from behind the counter. She was in her 60s with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and a face that had seen everything Brooklyn could throw at it. "Your booth's ready, honey." Vincent smiled. A real smile, not the calculated version he used in business. "Thanks, Rosie. How's your grandson doing?" "Made the honor roll again," she beamed. "That college fund you helped with? Best investment I ever made. He's a good kid. That's all him, not me." Rosie waved him off, but her eyes showed gratitude. 5 years ago, Vincent had helped her when medical bills had threatened to bury her. He didn't advertise his generosity, didn't expect anything in return. In his world, power came from many sources. Fear was one, respect was another. Sometimes the latter lasted longer. Vincent made his way to his usual booth, third from the back, left side, facing the door. Always facing the door. That wasn't paranoia. That was survival. Marco sat at a small table near the entrance, reading a newspaper he probably wasn't absorbing. Sal occupied a booth near the kitchen, positioned to cover the back exit. Both men were armed, both trained, both alert, despite their casual appearance. Vincent slid into the worn leather seat, feeling it give slightly under his weight. The booth had character, a long crack in the red vinyl, patched with duct tape that had faded from silver to gray. The table was old formica, patterned with boomerangs and starbursts in that distinctly 1950s style. Someone had carved JM plus RD into one corner, probably decades ago. Vincent wondered if JM and RD were still together, or if they even remembered this moment of youthful romance. He pulled out his phone and scanned his messages. 3 from his underboss, Michael Greco, about tonight's meeting. 2 from his lawyer about a property acquisition, 1 from his daughter, asking if he'd be at her school play next week. That last one he answered immediately. Wouldn't miss it. Front row. Love you. Being a father was the one role Vincent took more seriously than any other. His daughter, Sophia, was 19 now, studying business at NYU. She knew what her father did. You couldn't hide that kind of truth forever, but he'd worked hard to keep her separate from it. She had his intelligence and her mother's compassion. She'd build something better than he had. That was the point of everything, wasn't it? Each generation climbing a little higher, getting a little cleaner. Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti. Vincent looked up to see his waitress approaching. Sarah Chen had been working at Rosie's for about 6 months. Early 30s, he guessed, though she had one of those faces that could pass for younger. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform, the standard diner outfit of a white blouse and black slacks with an apron, somehow looked more professional on her than it did on the other staff. She moved with efficiency, no wasted motion, and her eyes were sharp, always watching, always aware. Vincent had noticed that about her from the beginning. Most people looked at others but didn't really see them. Sarah saw everything. Afternoon, Sarah, how's the day treating you? Can't complain. Steady crowd, good tips, roof doesn't leak. She pulled out her order pad, pen poised. The usual? The usual sounds perfect. She wrote it down even though she probably had it memorized. Turkey club on rye, no mayo, extra pickles, side of fries, coffee black. Soup today is minestrone. Interested? Sure, why not? It's that kind of day. Sarah nodded, making the note. She glanced out the window at the rain, then back at him. Cold front moving in. Supposed to drop to freezing tonight. Then I'm glad I'm having soup. She smiled, a small, professional smile, and turned to head back to the kitchen. Vincent watched her go, not in any inappropriate way, but with the observation that had kept him alive for 25 years. There was something about Sarah Chen that didn't quite fit. She was too observant for a career waitress, too composed, too something. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe she'd been military, maybe law enforcement, or maybe she'd just lived a life that taught you to pay attention. In his business, you learned to trust your instincts about people, and his instinct said Sarah Chen had a story. But as long as that story didn't intersect with his, it wasn't his concern. Vincent returned to his phone, scrolling through emails. A shipment from Italy was delayed. Nothing unusual, just customs being thorough. The legitimate side of his business, importing olive oil and wine, was actually profitable. He'd built it carefully over the years, creating a foundation that could withstand scrutiny. The other operations, the ones that required more discretion, were compartmentalized. Different people, different structures, different money flows. Compartmentalization was survival. His coffee arrived first, delivered by one of the younger waitresses. Melissa, maybe? He wasn't sure. She poured it with shaking hands, clearly nervous. New, probably. She'd either get comfortable or find another job. Vincent was stirring his coffee when his phone buzzed. Michael Greco calling. Yeah, Vincent answered. Hey boss, just confirming for tonight. 7 o'clock at the warehouse in Red Hook. Johnny and Frank will be there, plus the guys from the distribution side. I remember. Good, good. And, I wanted to run something by you. About restructuring the territory assignments. I think we could be more efficient if... Michael, I'm having lunch. We'll talk tonight. Right, yeah, of course. Sorry to bother you. Vincent ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. Michael had been his right hand for 15 years, had proven himself countless times. Reliable, smart, ambitious in the right ways. But lately there'd been something off. Nothing Vincent could identify specifically, just a feeling. Michael seemed eager. Almost too eager, like he was pushing for something. Or maybe Vincent was just getting paranoid in his old age. 45 wasn't old, but in this business, it was veteran status. Most guys didn't make it this far. They either ended up behind bars or in the ground. The ones who survived did so by being smart, being careful, and being willing to walk away when the odds turned bad. Vincent had no plans to walk away, but he also had no intention of ending up like some of the others he'd known. Power was intoxicating, but it was also temporary. The smart move was to build something that lasted, something you could pass on. He was working on that transition, legitimate businesses for Sophia to inherit, clean money, clean opportunities. Another 5 years, maybe 10, and he could step back completely, if he lived that long. The thought came unbidden, and Vincent pushed it away. You couldn't live in fear. Fear made you sloppy, made you make mistakes. You stayed alert, stayed prepared, but you didn't let the anxiety take over. Sarah returned with his soup and a basket of bread. She set them down with practiced ease, and Vincent noticed her eyes flick briefly to Marco near the entrance, then to Sal near the back. Most people wouldn't catch that. It was less than a second, a casual glance, but Vincent saw it. She'd clocked his security without making it obvious. Definitely former military or law enforcement. Thank you, Sarah. Your sandwich will be up in about 5 minutes. Anything else you need right now? I'm good. She nodded and moved to the next table, where a man in a business suit was gesturing impatiently at his watch. Sarah handled him with calm professionalism, taking his order without reacting to his rudeness. Another point in her favor. She didn't let people rattle her. Vincent tasted the minestrone. It was excellent, rich with vegetables and pasta, the broth perfectly seasoned. Rosie didn't cut corners on ingredients, even though she could probably save money doing so. That was integrity. In a world where most people would sell you out for the right price, integrity was rare. The diner continued its comfortable hum of activity around him. The construction crew finished their meal and filed out, their laughter carrying over the sound of the rain. The elderly couple sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from decades together. The woman with the laptop finally looked up, rubbed her eyes, and ordered more tea. Normal, ordinary, safe. Vincent allowed himself to relax slightly, letting the warmth of the soup and coffee ease the tension in his shoulders. These Tuesday lunches were his meditation, his moment of peace in a life that demanded constant vigilance. For 30, maybe 45 minutes, he could pretend he was just another person eating lunch, not a man responsible for an organization that stretched across 3 states. His sandwich arrived right on schedule. Sarah set it down along with a fresh cup of coffee. She'd noticed his cup was getting low without him having to ask. "Looks perfect," Vincent said. "Let me know if you need anything else." She moved away, and Vincent took a bite. The sandwich was as good as always. Fresh turkey, crisp bacon, lettuce, and tomato. The bread toasted just right. Simple food, done well. There was something to be said for that. As he ate, Vincent observed the diner with the same attention he brought to everything. The rain had intensified, drumming harder against the windows. A few more customers had come in, shaking off umbrellas and looking grateful to be out of the weather. A young couple with a baby, a man in a UPS uniform, a teenager with headphones who probably should have been in school, and there, by the window, a man in a dark jacket, nursing a cup of coffee he'd barely touched. Vincent cataloged him automatically. 30s, athletic build, nervous energy. He kept glancing at his watch, then out the window. Waiting for someone? Or watching something? Vincent's internal alert system ticked up a notch, but he didn't react visibly. Could be nothing. Could be a guy waiting for a date. But you stayed aware. Always. Marco caught Vincent's eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. He'd noticed the man too. Good. That's why Marco had the job. Vincent finished his sandwich and checked the time. 1:23 p.m. He had about 30 minutes before he needed to leave for his afternoon meetings. Maybe he'd have a piece of that apple pie. Rosie made it herself, and it was worth the extra time. But as he was about to signal Sarah for dessert, something changed in the atmosphere of the diner. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Vincent had spent too many years reading rooms not to notice. A shift in energy, a tension that hadn't been there before. Sarah was moving between tables, but her path seemed deliberately casual, bringing her closer to Vincent's booth. Her face remained neutral, professional, but her eyes, those sharp, watchful eyes, were sending a different message. She reached his table and began clearing his plates, which was odd because he hadn't signaled he was finished. She leaned in slightly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Don't react. Stay calm. Do you trust your instincts?" Vincent's pulse quickened, but his expression didn't change. "Yes." The man by the window. The van that's been parked across the street for the last 10 minutes. The sedan that passed 3 times in the last 20 minutes. Her hands continued moving, stacking dishes. To anyone watching, she was just doing her job. "You're about to be in danger." Vincent's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, threat assessments. His hand moved subtly toward his phone. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been watching them watch you, and I know what I'm looking at." Sarah's eyes met his for just a moment. "I'm going to get you more coffee. When I come back, I'll explain. But right now, don't stand up. Don't leave. Don't call attention to yourself." She walked away before Vincent could respond, carrying the dishes toward the kitchen. Vincent's heart was pounding now, but he kept his breathing steady. His posture relaxed. Years of practice kicked in. He caught Marco's eye and gave a subtle hand signal. Alert, possible threat, stay ready. Marco's newspaper lowered slightly. Sal shifted in his booth. Both men were now on high alert while maintaining their cover. Vincent looked out the window, taking in the street with new eyes. The white van Sarah mentioned was there, parked with the engine running. You could see the exhaust in the cold air. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. A vehicle like that could hold 3, maybe 4 people. Armed? Probably. The man by the window was definitely watching something. Not relaxed, not casual. His shoulders were tense. His hand kept moving to his jacket pocket. Phone? Weapon? Both? How had Vincent missed this? He'd gotten comfortable, let his guard down because this was Rosie's, because it was Tuesday, because this was supposed to be safe. Compartmentalization was survival, but routine was death. Sarah returned with fresh coffee, and as she poured, she spoke quietly. I need you to listen carefully and not interrupt. I don't work here. Not really. I'm a private security consultant. 3 weeks ago, I was hired to assess vulnerabilities in your operation. I've been observing patterns, routines, security measures. Vincent's jaw tightened. Someone had hired her to spy on him. Who hired you? I'll tell you everything, but right now that van has at least 2 people in it. The man by the window is their spotter. They've been setting up for the last 20 minutes, waiting for the right moment. When you stand up to leave, that's when they'll act. Act how? Sarah's expression remained calm, but her voice carried weight. There's a sniper on the rooftop across the street, northeast corner. I spotted the glint from his scope about 5 minutes ago when the sun broke through the clouds for a moment. He's been in position for 10 minutes. Vincent felt ice run through his veins. A professional hit, coordinated, planned. Someone wanted him dead, and they'd put resources into making it happen. Why are you telling me this? Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. If you were hired to assess vulnerabilities, why warn me? Because I was hired to find weaknesses, not to facilitate murder. And because I know who hired me. Someone in your organization. Someone close enough to know your routines, your schedules, your security protocols. Sarah finished pouring coffee and straightened. I was supposed to deliver my assessment report tonight. Instead, I'm delivering this warning. Vincent's mind was working through scenarios at lightning speed. Someone in his organization. Someone close. Who had that kind of access? Michael, Johnny, Frank, maybe a few others. But who had the motive? Who stood to gain? The meeting tonight, Vincent said slowly. 7 o'clock. Red Hook Warehouse. Sarah nodded. That's not a coincidence. You were supposed to die here during lunch. Your successor would already be in place, ready to take over at tonight's meeting. Clean transition. Michael, Vincent breathed. It made a horrible kind of sense. The eagerness, the restructuring ideas. Michael wanting to talk about territory assignments. He was positioning himself to take over. I can't confirm that yet, Sarah said, but I have suspicions. Right now our priority is getting you out of here alive. Vincent looked at his security. Marco and Sal were good, but if Sarah was right about a professional hit team, they might not be enough. My men are in danger too if this goes wrong. The spotter by the window, he's tracking them as well as you. If you make any obvious moves, if you signal an evacuation, they'll take their shot. They might not get a clean kill, but in the chaos they could still accomplish their goal. Vincent had faced danger before. He'd been shot at, threatened, survived 2 previous attempts on his life. But this was different. This was surgical, professional. This wasn't a hot-headed rival or a desperate competitor. This was someone who knew him, knew his patterns, knew his weaknesses. What do you suggest? Sarah glanced casually around the diner, her eyes taking in every detail. The rain is working in our favor. It degrades the sniper's sight picture, makes the shot harder. But it won't stop him if he has a clear target. We need to disrupt their timeline, create confusion. How? In about 90 seconds, I'm going to accidentally drop a full tray of dishes. It's going to be loud and dramatic. Everyone in here will look toward the sound, including the spotter. In that moment, you need to move. Not toward the door, toward the kitchen. Fast but not panicked. Your men need to converge on you as if it's an emergency exit strategy. We go out the back door into the alley. I have a car parked there. Vincent assessed the plan. It was risky, but doing nothing was riskier. And if the spotter realizes what's happening, he will, but he'll have to make a decision. Try for a difficult shot through the windows with all the activity, or alert his team to pursue. Either way, we'll have a few seconds advantage. That's all we need. You're asking me to trust you, someone I barely know. Sarah met his eyes fully for the first time. Yes, but consider this. If I wanted you dead, I'd have let you stand up 3 minutes ago. The fact that you're still sitting here, still breathing, means I've already chosen a side. Vincent studied her face. She wasn't lying. He'd learned to read deception, and there was none here. Just determination and something else. Conviction? Principle? Whatever it was, it felt genuine. Okay, Vincent said. We do it your way. Sarah nodded once. 90 seconds. When you hear the crash, move. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. She walked away, her movements still casual, still professional. She stopped at the coffee station and loaded up a large tray with multiple coffee pots, cups, and plates. It looked heavy, awkward, precarious. Vincent subtly caught Marco's eye and gave a series of hand signals they'd rehearsed. Emergency extraction, kitchen exit, follow immediately. Marco acknowledged and passed the signal to Sal. Both men shifted their positions slightly, readying themselves. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. Vincent forced himself to take a sip of coffee, to maintain the appearance of normalcy. His heart hammered against his ribs. His muscles were coiled, ready to explode into motion. The man by the window was still watching. The van's engine still idled. Somewhere above, on a rooftop Vincent couldn't see, a professional killer was looking through a scope, waiting for his target to stand. Vincent thought of Sophia, of the play next week, front row. He'd promised. He thought of his wife, Maria, and the promise he'd made at her funeral. To be better, to build something that lasted, to make sure their daughter had a different life. He thought of Michael, if it was Michael, and felt a deep sadness beneath the anger. 15 years of loyalty, friendship, brotherhood, all of it a lie? Or had something changed? Had power corrupted what was once genuine? Sarah was near the center of the diner now, the loaded tray balanced on one hand. She moved toward a table where 3 construction workers had just sat down. She reached toward the table with the tray and her foot caught on something. The tray tilted. For a fraction of a second it seemed like she might recover. Then physics took over. The crash was spectacular. Coffee pots shattered on impact. Ceramic cups exploded. Plates broke in a cascade of noise that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. Hot coffee spread across the floor in a dark wave. One of the construction workers yelped and jumped back as the liquid splashed toward him. Every head in the diner turned toward the sound. Vincent moved. He was out of the booth before the last pieces of ceramic stopped bouncing, moving fast toward the kitchen. Marco and Sal converged on him from opposite directions, their bodies forming a protective wall. The 3 of them hit the kitchen door together. "Hey, customers can't," someone started to say, but they were already through. The kitchen was a blur of stainless steel and heat. Cooks looked up in surprise as Vincent and his security team barreled through. Sarah was right behind them, having somehow navigated through the chaos of the spilled tray in seconds. "Back door, go," she commanded. They hit the back exit at a run. The door burst open onto a narrow alley that smelled of rain and garbage. Sarah's car, a nondescript gray Honda sedan, was parked 20 feet away, engine already running. "Get in," Sarah shouted. Marco and Sal had their weapons drawn now, scanning for threats. Vincent dove into the back seat. Marco took the front passenger seat. Sal started to get in but froze. "The van," he shouted. Vincent looked and saw the white van pulling into the mouth of the alley, blocking their escape route. The side door was sliding open. "Other way." Sarah threw the car into reverse and floored it. The Honda shot backward down the alley. Vincent was thrown against the seat as Sarah executed a precision reverse at high speed. She spun the wheel, and the car whipped around in a tight 180, tires squealing on the wet pavement. Now they were facing the opposite end of the alley, which opened onto a side street. Sarah slammed the car into drive and accelerated. Behind them, the van was trying to turn around in the narrow space, but it was too big, too unwieldy. They shot out of the alley onto the side street. Sarah took a hard right, then an immediate left, weaving through traffic with controlled aggression. She knew these streets, knew where to turn, where to accelerate, where to brake. "Everyone okay?" she asked, her voice steady despite the high-speed driving. "Yeah," Vincent managed. His adrenaline was through the roof, his hands shaking slightly. "Yeah, we're okay." Marco had his phone out. "Boss, I need to call in the team, get—" "No," Vincent said sharply. "No calls, not yet. But someone in the organization set this up, Marco. Until we know who, we don't know who to trust." Vincent looked at Sarah in the rearview mirror. Where are we going? Somewhere safe? Somewhere they won't think to look. Sarah took another turn, this one onto a busier avenue. She merged into traffic, matching the flow, becoming just another anonymous vehicle in the Brooklyn afternoon. The rain continued to fall, washing away evidence, blurring the world beyond the windows. Vincent Moretti had come to Rosie's diner for an ordinary lunch. He was leaving, having survived an assassination attempt, saved by a woman who should have been just a waitress, but was clearly so much more. His phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Everything okay? Heard there was an incident at the diner." Vincent stared at the message. How did Michael know already? The hit had failed less than 5 minutes ago. Unless... He looked at Sarah. She caught his eye in the mirror and gave a slight nod. She'd been right about everything so far. "We need to talk," Vincent said. "All of it. Everything you know." "I know," Sarah replied. "And I will. But first, we get somewhere secure. Then we figure out who just tried to kill you. And more importantly, why." The car merged onto the expressway, heading away from Bensonhurst, away from Rosie's diner, away from what had been Vincent Moretti's routine for 2 years. Routine was dead now, but Vincent Moretti was still alive, and someone was going to answer for that. The safe house was a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Sheepshead Bay, tucked into a building that looked like every other aging brick structure in the neighborhood. Sarah pulled into an underground parking garage 3 blocks away, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in silence. The only sound was the rain drumming on the concrete ceiling above them and the ticking of the cooling engine. Vincent watched her in the rearview mirror. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her breathing controlled. No sign of the adrenaline crash that should have hit by now. This woman had done this before, maybe many times. "We clear?" Marco asked, his weapon still in his hand but pointed safely at the floor. Sarah nodded. 3-minute walk. "We go separately. Marco, you're first. Exit through the stairwell on the north side. Walk to the corner. Turn left on Emmons Avenue. The building is number 2847. Gray brick, green awning. 3rd floor. Apartment 3C. Door will be unlocked. Clear the apartment and secure it." Marco looked at Vincent for confirmation. Vincent gave a slight nod. Marco holstered his weapon, adjusted his jacket to conceal it, and stepped out of the car. Within seconds, he disappeared into the stairwell. "Sal, you're 30 seconds behind him. Same route. You're the exterior security. Position yourself where you can watch the building entrance and the street approaches." Sal looked less comfortable taking orders from someone he didn't know, but the situation left little room for argument. He checked his watch and waited the prescribed 30 seconds before following Marco's path. Now it was just Vincent and Sarah in the car. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions. "You've done this before," Vincent said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Military?" "FBI. 10 years. Started in intelligence analysis. Moved to counterintelligence. Finished in organized crime." Sarah turned in her seat to face him properly. "I left 3 years ago. Started my own security consulting firm. Mostly corporate work. Executive protection, threat assessment, security audits." "Why'd you leave the bureau?" Sarah's expression flickered with something, pain, regret, before settling back into professional neutrality. "That's a longer conversation. Right now we need to focus on keeping you alive. Keeping me alive is part of that conversation. You said someone in my organization hired you. I need to know everything. Who, why, what you found, what you reported, all of it. You'll get it all. But not in a parking garage." Sarah checked her watch. "Give Marco 2 minutes to clear the apartment, then we go." Vincent forced himself to be patient, though every instinct screamed for answers. Someone close to him had betrayed him. Someone he trusted. Someone who knew his routines well enough to plan his murder down to the minute and location. The possibilities cycled through his mind like a carousel of suspicion. Michael was the obvious choice. As underboss, he had access to everything. Schedules, security protocols, financial information. He'd been positioning himself, asking about restructuring. But was it too obvious? Could this be a frame job? Someone else making it look like Michael? Or was Vincent trying to rationalize away the truth because accepting Michael's betrayal hurt too much? "Time," Sarah said, interrupting his thoughts. "Let's move." They exited the car and walked through the parking garage in silence. Sarah moved with purpose, but not haste. Just another person going about their day. Vincent matched her pace. He'd learned long ago that looking out of place drew attention. Confidence and normalcy were the best disguises. The November cold hit them as they emerged onto the street. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the wind carried the sharp bite of winter. Sarah led them down the sidewalk, past a bodega with fruit displays out front, past a dry cleaner with steamed-up windows, past an elderly man walking a small dog that looked as miserable about the weather as its owner. The building at 2847 was exactly as Sarah had described. They entered through a lobby that smelled of old carpet and cleaning products. The elevator was out of order. A sign taped to the doors proclaimed it had been temporarily unavailable for what looked like several months. They took the stairs. Apartment 3C had a solid door with 3 locks. Sarah knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. The door opened immediately. Marco stood there, weapon drawn but pointed down. "Clear," he said. "No signs of tampering, no surveillance devices that I could find. Good work." Sarah entered and Vincent followed. The apartment was clean but impersonal, the kind of place that saw temporary residents rather than permanent ones. Basic furniture that had come from assemble-it-yourself boxes. Bare walls except for a generic landscape print above the sofa. Kitchen with minimal supplies. But the windows had good sight lines to the street below, and there were multiple exits. It was functional. Sarah went to the window and adjusted the blinds, creating a view out while limiting the view in. "Sit, Mr. Moretti. We have a lot to discuss." Vincent sat on the sofa. Marco positioned himself near the door, still alert. Sarah pulled a chair from the small dining table and sat facing Vincent, close enough to speak quietly but far enough to maintain professional distance. 3 weeks ago, Sarah began, I received a call from someone identifying himself as Michael Greco. He said he was concerned about security vulnerabilities in his organization. He wanted a professional assessment, someone from outside, someone without ties to your world who could provide an objective analysis. How did he find you? I've built a reputation in the security consulting field. Word gets around. He said he'd received my name from a mutual contact, a defense attorney I'd worked with on a witness protection case 2 years ago. Vincent knew the attorney. Legitimate connection. That gave the story credibility. Michael told me he was worried about external threats, rivals, law enforcement pressure, security gaps that could be exploited. He offered me $50,000 for a 3-week assessment. 25 up front, 25 on delivery of my report. Sarah leaned forward slightly. The money was clean. Came from what appeared to be a legitimate consulting budget. I checked. So you took the job. I took the job, but I had conditions. I work within legal boundaries. I won't hack systems, won't engage in illegal surveillance, won't break laws to get information. I observe, I analyze, I assess. Michael agreed to those terms. And you got hired on at Rosie's Diner. That was my idea. Michael provided me with your schedule, your routines, your known locations. The diner stood out. You went there every Tuesday, same time for months. It was your most consistent pattern and therefore your biggest vulnerability. I needed to observe it firsthand, so I applied for a position. Rosie hired me within 2 days. Vincent thought back over the past 6 months. Had he noticed anything unusual about Sarah's hiring? Had Rosie mentioned it? He couldn't remember. That was the problem with routine. It made you blind to changes. What else did Michael tell you? Vincent asked. He provided detailed information about your security setup. The fact that you always travel with at least 2 personal security guards. That Marco and Sal were your primary detail. That you prefer to sit facing the door. That you don't use your phone for sensitive conversations. That you vary your routes but not your destinations. Sarah paused. He gave me everything I would need to identify weaknesses in your protection. And what weaknesses did you find? Routine was your biggest vulnerability, which I already mentioned. But there were others. Your security team is competent but small. 2 guards can't cover all angles in a public space. You don't wear body armor. Understandable given your public image, but it leaves you exposed. Your phone isn't encrypted to government standards. Your vehicles, while armored, follow predictable patterns. Sarah counted off the points on her fingers. Most critically, your trust in your inner circle made you vulnerable to insider threats. You assumed loyalty. That assumption was your greatest weakness. The words stung because they were true. Vincent had built his organization on loyalty, or what he'd thought was loyalty. He'd rewarded those who stood by him, eliminated those who betrayed him, and assumed the structure would hold. But loyalty was an abstract concept. It lasted until it didn't. When did you realize something was wrong? Vincent asked. Sarah stood and walked to the window, checking the street below before answering. About a week into my observation, I started noticing things that didn't fit. Michael called me 3 times, supposedly to check on my progress, but the questions he asked weren't about security improvements. They were about your specific movements, your timing, your vulnerability windows. He wasn't asking how to protect you better. He was asking how to get to you. That could have been thoroughness, understanding threats to prevent them. That's what I told myself at first, but then I started seeing other things. I observed Michael meeting with people who had no obvious connection to your organization. I documented license plates, ran them through databases I still have access to. 2 of the vehicles came back registered to known associates of the Russo family. Vincent's jaw tightened. The Russos were competitors, not enemies necessarily, but not friends either. They respected boundaries because the alternative was war, and war was bad for business. But if Michael was talking to them, I couldn't prove anything from those meetings alone, Sarah continued. Could have been legitimate, back-channel communications to prevent conflicts. But combined with Michael's questions about your vulnerabilities, it raised red flags. Why didn't you come to me then? Because I had no proof, just suspicions. And because if I was wrong, I'd have destroyed the career of someone who might have been genuinely trying to protect you. Sarah turned from the window. I'm good at my job, Mr. Moretti, but I'm not infallible. I needed more before I could make an accusation like that. So what changed? 2 days ago, I intercepted a conversation. I was at the diner, and Michael came in. He didn't know I worked there. He'd never seen me in person. We'd only communicated by phone and encrypted email. He sat in a booth with another man. I didn't recognize the man at first, but I took his picture on my phone while pretending to check the time. Sarah pulled out her phone and brought up a photo. She showed it to Vincent. The man in the image was in his 30s, athletic build, with a scar along his left jaw. Daniel Torres, Vincent said quietly. He's one of Michael's personal crew, low-level enforcer, handles security for some of our operations. He's also a trained marksman, Marine Corps, decorated service, left under circumstances that are sealed in his military record. After I identified him, I did more digging. Torres has been seen at 3 different shooting ranges in the past month, practicing with a high-powered rifle. The implications settled over Vincent like a weight. He's the sniper. That's my assessment, and the conversation I overheard 2 days ago confirmed it. Michael told Torres that Tuesday is the day, and to make sure the equipment is properly calibrated. Torres asked if Michael was sure about going through with it. Michael said it was time for a change, that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions for the good of everyone. Vincent stood and paced the small living room. His mind was racing through scenarios, implications, consequences. Michael wasn't just planning to take over. He was planning a complete restructuring. The meeting tonight at the warehouse would have been Michael's coronation, with Vincent's death hours old and Michael positioned as the natural successor. Why would Michael do this? Vincent asked, more to himself than to Sarah. I've given him everything. Authority, money, respect. What more does he want? Power, Sarah said simply. Complete power, not shared power. You're the head of the organization, which means you make final decisions. Michael might have authority, but it flows from you. Without you, he becomes the source. That's a different kind of power. We could have worked out a succession plan. I've been thinking about stepping back anyway. In a few years, I could have transitioned everything to him. He didn't need to do this. Maybe he didn't want to wait a few years. Or maybe he didn't trust that you'd actually go through with it. Or maybe, Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Maybe he's been planning this for longer than you think, and there's no rational explanation that will satisfy you. Some people want power badly enough that they'll destroy everything to get it, even relationships that matter. Marco spoke up from his position by the door. Boss, we need to decide what we're doing. Michael expects you at that meeting tonight. If you don't show, he'll know something went wrong. Vincent checked his watch. 2:47 p.m. The meeting was in 4 hours and 13 minutes. Michael would be expecting him to walk into that warehouse, probably expecting to be told about the failed hit at the diner, ready to express concern and support while secretly furious that his plan had fallen apart. What's your play? Sarah asked. You have several options, none of them perfect. Vincent appreciated that she was letting him make the decision rather than pushing her own agenda. Walk me through the options as you see them. Sarah counted them off. Option 1. You disappear. Go underground. Reach out to loyalists you absolutely trust. Rebuild from a position of safety. Downside. Michael consolidates power while you're gone, turns the organization against you, makes you look weak or paranoid. Not acceptable. I don't run. Option 2. You confront Michael directly. Right now. Bring loyal people, force him to answer for what he's done. Downside. Without concrete proof, it's your word against his. Could split the organization into factions. Could lead to violence. Also not acceptable. I need proof, not just accusations. Option 3. You go to the meeting tonight as planned. You play ignorant, act like nothing happened, and watch Michael's reactions. Use the time to gather evidence and identify who else is involved in the conspiracy. Downside. You're putting yourself in proximity to someone who wants you dead, in a location he chose. Extremely dangerous. Vincent considered this. It was risky, but it had strategic value. If I don't show up, I lose the advantage of Michael thinking his plan failed without knowing why. If I show up, I can watch him scramble, see who else reveals themselves. That's a dangerous game, Mr. Moretti. My whole life is a dangerous game. Vincent turned to Marco. Call Tony. Tell him to bring the car to the address Sarah gives you. Tell him nothing else. No explanations, no context. Just the pickup location and time. Boss, you can't trust anyone right now. What if Tony has been with me for 8 years. He drives. That's it. He's not involved in operations, doesn't attend meetings, has no ambition beyond doing his job well and getting paid. If Michael's conspiracy includes Tony, then I've already lost, and nothing matters anyway. Marco didn't look convinced, but he pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway to make the call. Vincent turned back to Sarah. I need everything you have. Photos, notes, recordings, evidence, all of it. And I need to know exactly who you've told about this. No one. I kept it compartmentalized because I wasn't sure who to trust. My notes are encrypted and backed up to a secure cloud server. My evidence is documented but not submitted to anyone. Sarah pulled out a small flash drive from her pocket. This is everything. Photos of Michael meeting with Russo associates. Documentation of Torres's activities. Audio recording from the conversation at the diner. Analysis of financial movements that suggest Michael has been siphoning money to offshore accounts for the past 6 months. Vincent took the flash drive. It was small, innocuous, just a few grams of plastic and silicon. But the information it contained could bring down his underboss and reveal a conspiracy that went deeper than he'd imagined. The offshore accounts, Vincent said. How much money are we talking about? Approximately $2.3 million over 6 months. Small enough to hide in the normal flow of operations, but large enough to fund a new operation or pay off co-conspirators. Vincent did the math in his head. That was significant money, but not catastrophic to the organization. What concerned him more was the planning involved. 6 months meant Michael had been working on this for at least that long, probably longer. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a momentary betrayal. This was calculated, systematic, patient. That made it worse somehow. A hot-headed betrayal could be understood, even forgiven. But this cold, methodical planning, it meant Michael had looked Vincent in the eye every day for months while plotting his death, had smiled, had joked, had pretended friendship while preparing treachery. I need to know who else is involved, Vincent said. Michael can't be doing this alone. He needs support, people willing to follow him after I'm gone. Based on my observations and analysis, I believe at least 3 others in your inner circle are part of the conspiracy. Johnny Sacco, Frank DeLuca, and possibly Anthony Marconi. I have photographic evidence of all 3 meeting with Michael at odd hours, in locations where they wouldn't normally meet. Private conversations. Excluded others who would typically be included. Johnny and Frank were longtime associates. Men Vincent had trusted with significant responsibilities. Anthony was newer, ambitious, but Vincent had thought he'd earned his position through competence, not conspiracy. How many people can I trust? Vincent asked quietly. I don't know. That's the honest answer. Marco and Sal seemed genuinely loyal. They didn't hesitate to follow you today, and their reaction suggested they were truly surprised by the threat. Tony probably doesn't know anything. Beyond that? Sarah shrugged. You'll need to be very careful about who you bring into your confidence. Marco returned from the hallway. Tony's on his way. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd be here in 20 minutes. Good. Vincent looked at both Marco and Sarah. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to that meeting tonight. Marco, you're with me. Sal stays here with Sarah. She's now a valuable asset, and I need her protected. If anything happens to me, Sal, you make sure Sarah gets somewhere safe, and you deliver that flash drive to my daughter. There's a protocol. She knows what to do with it. Boss, I don't like this, Marco said. Walking into that warehouse is suicide if they're all against you. They won't try anything at the meeting. Too many witnesses, too much risk of things going wrong. Michael's smart. He knows that if something happens to me in a location he chose with his people around, everyone will know it was him. He needs my death to look like an outside hit. That's why the diner made sense. Public location, plausible deniability, he's nowhere near the scene. Sarah nodded slowly. That's sound reasoning. But Michael knows the diner hit failed. He'll be adjusting his plans. You need to be ready for anything. I'm always ready for anything. That's how I've survived this long. Vincent sat back down, suddenly feeling the weight of the past hour. I need you to tell me something, Sarah. Why did you really warn me today? You said you don't facilitate murder, and I believe that. But you could have just walked away, delivered your report, taken your money, and let events play out. Instead, you put yourself at risk. Why? Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Vincent saw the professional mask slip. Beneath it was something raw, something painful. My brother, she said finally. His name was David. He was 22 years old when he died. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A convenience store in Queens when two rival organizations decided to have a territorial dispute. Bullets started flying. David was just buying lottery tickets. He died on the floor of that store, bleeding out, while men fought over territory that didn't matter, over pride that wasn't worth a life. Vincent felt a deep pang of sympathy. He'd caused pain like that, directly and indirectly. It was part of his world, part of what his choices had created. I'm sorry, Vincent said, and meant it. After David died, I threw myself into my work. I told myself I was fighting the good fight, taking down criminals, making the world safer, and I did. I helped put away some truly dangerous people, but I also saw how the system works, how violence begets violence, how revenge becomes cycles that never end, how young men die for old men's ambitions. Sarah's voice was controlled, but Vincent could hear the emotion underneath. When I left the FBI, I promised myself I'd use my skills differently. I'd prevent violence when I could, de-escalate situations, find solutions that didn't end with someone's brother, someone's son, someone's father dying on a floor somewhere. So when you realized Michael was planning to kill me, I saw another cycle beginning. You die. Michael takes over. Your loyalists either fall in line or get eliminated. Michael's enemies eventually come for him. More people die. It never stops unless someone chooses to stop it. Sarah met his eyes. I'm not naive, Mr. Moretti. I know what you do. I know you're not innocent. But I also know that preventing your death today might prevent a dozen more deaths tomorrow. That's why I warned you. Vincent absorbed this. Here was a woman who had every reason to hate people like him, yet she'd saved his life based on principle. That was rare. That was valuable. What you did took courage, Vincent said. You know Michael will figure out you warned me. Once that happens, you're a target. I know. That's why I'm trusting you to protect me, just like you're trusting me with the information that could save your life. We're in this together now. Yes, Vincent agreed. We are. Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it. Tony's 5 minutes out. Vincent stood and straightened his jacket. The expensive fabric was slightly wrinkled from the ordeal, but he still looked presentable. Image mattered. Control mattered. Even in crisis, especially in crisis, you maintained the appearance of being unshaken. Sarah, I need you to stay here with Sal. Go through everything on that flash drive with him. Identify every person in every photo. Document every piece of evidence. If this goes wrong tonight, that information needs to be organized and accessible. Understood. Marco, we're going to play this cool. We arrive at the meeting on time. We act like nothing happened. I had lunch somewhere else today. The diner thing was just a random incident we heard about on the news. We watch everyone's reactions. We note who seems surprised, who seems disappointed, who seems calculating, and we don't trust anyone until we're absolutely sure. Got it, boss. Vincent turned to Sarah one more time. You've done good work. Professional, thorough, principled. When this is over, if I'm still alive, I'm going to make sure you're compensated beyond our original agreement. And I'm going to recommend you to people who need someone trustworthy. That's worth more than money in my world. I appreciate that. Just focus on staying alive tonight. Everything else is secondary. Vincent nodded and headed for the door with Marco. As he reached for the handle, Sarah called out, Mr. Moretti, one more thing. He turned back. Michael knows you well. He knows how you think, how you react, what buttons to push. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Don't give him ammunition to use against you. Stay cold, stay smart, and remember, the best way to beat someone at a game is to refuse to play by their rules. Vincent smiled slightly. Good advice, I'll keep it in mind. They left the apartment and made their way back down the stairs. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and glistening. The afternoon was moving toward evening, the light taking on that peculiar quality of late autumn, pale and thin, as if the sun itself was tired. Tony pulled up in the Mercedes exactly on time. He got out, opened the rear door for Vincent, then took his position behind the wheel once Marco was seated up front. "Where to, boss?" Tony asked. "Home first. I need to change clothes and make some calls. Then we have that meeting at 7. You got it." As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Vincent looked back at the building where Sarah and Sal were secured. She was right. They were in this together now. She'd saved his life, he'd protect hers. That was the deal. Unspoken, but understood. The question now was whether he could survive long enough to keep that promise. Vincent pulled out his phone and looked at the message from Michael again. "Everything okay? Heard there was an incident at the diner." He typed a response. "All good? Wasn't there today. Change plans at last minute, see you at 7. The reply came almost instantly. "Good to hear. See you tonight." Vincent stared at those words. Good to hear. Was that relief? Frustration? Disappointment that the hit had failed? It was impossible to tell from text. But tonight Vincent would see Michael's face, and he'd know. After 15 years, he could read that man like a book, or at least he'd thought he could. Maybe he'd been wrong about that too. The Mercedes moved through Brooklyn traffic, heading toward Vincent's home in Dyker Heights. The afternoon was fading. Evening was coming, and with it, a confrontation that would determine the future of everything Vincent had built. He thought about Sarah's words. The best way to beat someone at a game is to refuse to play by their rules. Vincent Moretti had been playing by certain rules his entire career. Rules about loyalty, about hierarchy, about trust. Michael had broken those rules. Now Vincent needed to decide what rules, if any, still applied. The car turned onto his street. Home was ahead. After that, the warehouse. After that, the truth, whatever that truth turned out to be. The warehouse in Red Hook stood like a monument to Brooklyn's industrial past. 3 stories of red brick and steel girders, windows long since broken or boarded over. The neighborhood had gentrified around it, craft breweries and artisan coffee shops replacing the longshoremen's bars. But this particular building remained frozen in time. Vincent owned it through a shell corporation, used it for storage and occasional meetings that required privacy. Tonight it would serve a different purpose. The Mercedes pulled up to the loading dock at exactly 6:58 p.m. Vincent had spent the afternoon at home changing into a fresh suit, reviewing Sarah's evidence on the flash drive, and making careful phone calls to people he trusted. The list was shorter than he'd hoped. "Ready, boss?" Marco asked from the front seat. Vincent looked at the warehouse. Light glowed from the second-floor windows. The meeting room. He could see shadows moving inside. People were already there, waiting for him. Among them, a man who wanted him dead. "Let's do this," Vincent said. They exited the vehicle. The November evening had turned bitter cold, the temperature dropping fast now that the sun had set. Vincent's breath misted in the air as he walked toward the entrance. Marco stayed 2 steps behind and to the left, close enough to respond to threats, far enough to give Vincent space. The door was unlocked. They climbed the interior stairs, their footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. Vincent could hear voices from above, casual conversation, laughter, normal sounds. No one would guess that this meeting was anything other than routine business. Vincent pushed open the door to the second-floor meeting room. The space had been set up with a long table in the center, chairs arranged around it. 6 men were already present. Michael Greco stood near the window talking on his phone. Johnny Sacco and Frank DeLuca sat at the table reviewing papers. Anthony Marconi leaned against the far wall, checking his watch. 2 others, Vincent's logistics coordinator and his accountant, sat quietly, waiting. Michael looked up as Vincent entered. For just a fraction of a second, less than a heartbeat, Vincent saw something flash across Michael's face. Surprise, disappointment, fear. Then it was gone, replaced by a warm smile. "Vincent, good to see you." Michael crossed the room, hand extended. "I was worried after hearing about that incident at the diner." Vincent shook his hand, reading every micro-expression, every subtle tell. "Changed my plans last minute. Ended up grabbing something at home instead." "What happened at Rosie's?" "Shooting, from what I heard on the news. Someone took a shot through the window. Cops are calling it random violence, maybe gang-related. Michael's eyes searched Vincent's face. Lucky you weren't there. Very lucky, Vincent agreed. He walked to the head of the table and sat down. Let's get started. I know everyone's got places to be. The meeting proceeded normally at first. They discussed distribution routes, reviewed financial reports, addressed personnel issues. Vincent watched everyone carefully. Johnny and Frank were harder to read, veteran members of the organization who'd learned to keep their faces neutral. Anthony seemed nervous, but he was always nervous around Vincent. The accountant and logistics coordinator appeared focused solely on their work. And Michael. Michael was performing perfectly, attentive, supportive, offering suggestions that made sense. If Vincent hadn't known what he knew, he would have seen nothing unusual. About 40 minutes into the meeting, Vincent decided to test the waters. I've been thinking about succession planning, he said casually, interrupting a discussion about warehouse inventory. Not because I'm going anywhere soon, but because it's smart to have a plan. Michael, you and I should sit down soon and talk about long-term structure. He watched Michael's reaction carefully. There, a slight tension in the shoulders, a momentary hesitation before responding. Of course, Vincent. Whatever you think is best. I'm happy to discuss it whenever you want. Good. Maybe next week. I'm thinking it might be time to start transitioning some responsibilities, grooming the next generation. Vincent looked around the table. We've all been doing this a long time. None of us are getting younger. Johnny spoke up. You thinking about retiring, boss? Thinking about options. My daughter's in college now. I'd like to spend more time with her. Maybe travel a bit. The business runs smooth these days. Maybe it's time to let other people carry more of the load. Vincent saw the calculation happening in Michael's eyes. Was this a trap? A test? Or was Vincent genuinely considering stepping back? The uncertainty was exactly what Vincent wanted to create. Before anyone could respond, there was a knock at the door. Marco opened it. One of the guards from downstairs stood there, looking uncertain. Boss, sorry to interrupt. There's someone here says he's expected. Name's Torres? Vincent felt the temperature in the room drop. He glanced at Michael and saw the brief flash of panic before control reasserted itself. Torres? Vincent asked, as if confused. I don't remember scheduling anyone named Torres. Michael stood quickly. That's my mistake, Vincent. I asked him to stop by. I wanted to introduce you to someone who might be useful for security. Former military, excellent credentials. I should have cleared it with you first. Former military, you say? Vincent kept his voice neutral. Well, we're almost done here. Might as well meet him while everyone's together. Send him up. The guard nodded and disappeared. Vincent could feel the tension ratcheting up in the room. Michael had recovered his composure, but there was a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Footsteps on the stairs. The door opened. Daniel Torres walked in, and Vincent recognized him immediately from Sarah's photograph. Mid-30s, athletic build, the scar along his jaw. He moved like someone with combat training. Balanced, aware, ready. Mr. Moretti, Torres said, extending his hand. It's an honor to meet you. Michael's told me a lot about the organization. Vincent stood and shook his hand, looking directly into Torres's eyes. Has he now? And what exactly has Michael told you? Torres glanced at Michael uncertainly. Just that you run a tight operation, that security is a priority, that there might be opportunities for someone with my background. Your background being? Marine Corps, sir. 8 years. 2 tours overseas. Decorated marksman. Since leaving the service, I've done private security work. Marksman, Vincent repeated. That's interesting. We don't usually need marksmanship skills in our line of work. We're in import-export primarily. Michael, why did you think we needed a marksman? Michael stepped forward smoothly. I was thinking about executive protection, Vincent. Having someone with advanced tactical skills could improve our security profile. We have security. Marco and Sal have been with me for years. They're loyal, competent. Why would I need someone new? Vincent let the question hang in the air. The room had gone very quiet. Everyone could sense the undercurrent, the tension beneath the surface conversation. Torres looked increasingly uncomfortable. Look, if this is a bad time, I can come back. No, Vincent said sharply. Stay. I want to understand exactly what's going on here. Michael, you hired this man without consulting me? I didn't hire him. I was just doing preliminary screening, thought I'd introduce you. What else have you been doing without consulting me? The question landed like a stone. Michael's expression shifted, became guarded. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Vincent walked slowly around the table toward Michael. See, Michael, I've been hearing some interesting things lately. About meetings you've been taking, conversations you've been having, financial movements that don't quite add up. Johnny and Frank exchanged glances. Anthony had gone pale. The accountant and logistics coordinator looked confused, uncertain whether they should leave. Michael held his ground. Vincent, if you have concerns about my work, we should discuss them privately. Why? Everyone here is family, right? Everyone here is loyal. Vincent's voice hardened. Or are they? The door opened again. Vincent had been expecting this. He'd sent word to Sal an hour ago. Sarah Chen walked in and the effect was immediate. Torres actually took a step back, recognition and fear crossing his face. Michael's composure finally cracked, his expression showing genuine shock. You, Torres said to Sarah. The waitress from the diner, Sarah finished calmly. Yes, though I think we both know I'm not really a waitress. Vincent gestured to Sarah. Everyone, this is Sarah Chen. She's a security consultant, former FBI. For the past 3 weeks, she's been conducting an assessment of our organization's vulnerabilities. Michael, you remember Sarah, don't you? You hired her. Michael's face had gone white. Vincent, I can explain. Can you? Because here's what I think happened. I think you hired Sarah to find weaknesses in my security. I think you found those weaknesses and decided to exploit them. I think you've been planning to remove me and take over the organization. And I think, Mr. Torres here was supposed to be the instrument of my removal. Torres raised his hands defensively. I don't know what you're talking about. You were on a rooftop across from Rosie's diner this afternoon, Sarah said, her voice calm and factual. 3rd floor, northeast corner. You had a clear line of sight to Mr. Moretti's usual booth. You were waiting for him to stand up. That was the signal. You were going to take the shot through the window. That's insane, Torres protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Vincent pulled out his phone and brought up one of Sarah's photographs. Torres at a shooting range, practicing with a high-powered rifle. This was taken 4 days ago. Want to explain why you've been practicing long-range shots if this was just about executive protection? The silence was deafening. Everyone in the room was now staring at Michael and Torres. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. Michael's expression changed. The mask of loyalty fell away, replaced by something colder, more calculating. You think you're so smart, Vincent? You think you've figured it all out? I know enough. I know you've been stealing money. 2.3 million over 6 months. I know you've been meeting with the Russos. I know you plan to have me killed today and take over at this meeting. Vincent's voice remained calm, controlled. What I don't know is why. Why, Michael? I gave you everything. You gave me scraps. Michael's anger erupted suddenly, years of resentment boiling over. I've been by your side for 15 years. I've done the hard work, made the tough calls, built relationships, solved problems. And what do I get? A title, a salary, permission to make decisions that you can override whenever you want. That's how organizations work. There's a hierarchy. You knew that when you started. I also knew I was smarter than you, more capable, more visionary. You've been coasting on your father's reputation and old alliances. This organization could be twice as big, twice as profitable, if you weren't so cautious, so conservative. Or it could be destroyed, Vincent countered. You think the Russos are offering you partnership? They're using you. The moment I'm gone, they'll move in and take everything. You're a useful idiot, Michael. Michael's face flushed with rage. You're wrong. I've negotiated terms. I have agreements in place. You have nothing. You're a traitor who's about to lose everything. Vincent looked around the room. Johnny, Frank, Anthony. I'm guessing you 3 are part of this, am I right? Johnny stood slowly. Vincent, you need to understand. This isn't personal. It's business. The organization needs new leadership, new direction. Michael's right. We could be doing so much more. So you're with him. Vincent nodded slowly. 15 years of loyalty, gone, just like that. Frank spoke up, his voice defensive. It's not about loyalty, it's about survival. The world's changing, we need to change with it. Vincent looked at Anthony, who hadn't spoken. And you? Anthony wouldn't meet his eyes. I'm sorry, boss, I really am. But I have a family to think about. Michael promised me. Michael promised you what? A bigger cut? More territory? Vincent shook his head. You traded loyalty for promises from a man who's proven he'll betray anyone. The accountant and logistics coordinator had both stood and were edging toward the door. We're not part of this, the accountant said quickly. We just handle the books. We don't get involved in... Go, Vincent said. This doesn't concern you. They left quickly, grateful for the escape. Now it was just Vincent and Marco facing Michael, Torres, Johnny, Frank, and Anthony. 5 against 2. In terms of pure numbers, Vincent was outmatched. But he wasn't relying on numbers. "Here's the problem with your plan, Michael," Vincent said. "You assumed I'd be dead before I figured it out. You assumed your conspiracy would remain secret until it was too late for me to respond. You were wrong on both counts. So what are you going to do?" Michael challenged. "We're all armed. You're outnumbered. Even with Marco, you can't take all of us. And even if you could, what then? You can't run an organization by yourself. Kill us, and you'll have to rebuild from nothing." "Who said anything about killing anyone?" Vincent asked. "I'm not you, Michael. I don't murder people who get in my way." Sarah stepped forward. "Before this conversation continues, I should mention something. For the past hour, I've been transmitting audio from this meeting to a secure server. Everything that's been said has been recorded and backed up. If anything happens to Mr. Moretti, or to me, that recording will be automatically forwarded to law enforcement along with all the evidence I've gathered over the past 3 weeks." Michael's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sarah pulled out her phone and played back the last 30 seconds of conversation. Michael's voice clear and unmistakable, admitting to the assassination attempt. The calculation changed. Vincent could see it happening on Michael's face. If he tried anything now, if Vincent disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, the evidence would destroy him. The police would have motive, opportunity, and his own recorded confession. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. "This is what's going to happen," Vincent said, his voice cold and final. "Michael, you have 24 hours to leave New York. I don't care where you go. Florida, California, Europe, just disappear. Take nothing but what you can carry. Leave the organization, leave your accounts, leave everything behind. You can't just—" "I can, and I am. You're done, Michael. Consider yourself fortunate that I'm letting you walk away with your life. That's more mercy than you showed me." Vincent turned to the others. "Johnny, Frank, Anthony, you have a choice. Stay loyal and accept that there will be consequences for your betrayal. Reduced positions, reduced authority, closer supervision. Or leave with Michael and never come back. Choose now." Johnny looked at Frank, then at Michael. "What are we going to do?" "We fight," Michael said. "We don't just roll over and end up in prison?" Frank shook his head. "No, I'm out. Vincent, I'll accept your terms. I'll take the demotion. Earn back your trust. I made a mistake." Anthony nodded quickly. "Me too. I'm sorry, boss. I'm really sorry." Johnny hesitated longer but finally nodded. "Yeah, okay. I'm with Vincent." Michael looked at his co-conspirators with contempt. "Cowards. All of you. Realists," Frank corrected. "We made a play. It failed. Now we deal with the consequences." Torres had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up. "What about me? I was just hired to do a job. I didn't know all the background." "You knew enough," Vincent said coldly. "You knew you were being paid to take a life. That's enough. You have the same 24 hours as Michael. Disappear. If I ever see you again, if I ever hear about you operating in my territory, there won't be a second chance." Torres nodded, already backing toward the door. He left quickly, not looking back. Michael stood alone now, his allies having abandoned him. The rage and arrogance had drained away, leaving something smaller, diminished. 15 years, Michael said quietly. "It meant nothing. It meant everything," Vincent replied. "That's why this hurts. That's why I'm giving you this chance instead of what you deserve. You were my friend, Michael. I trusted you. And you threw it away for power you weren't patient enough to earn. So that's it? I just leave? Walk away from everything I built? You didn't build it. We built it. Together. But you tried to destroy that partnership, so yes, you walk away. Be grateful you're walking at all." Michael stared at Vincent for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Then something seemed to break inside him. His shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time he sounded genuine. "I thought I wanted this. I thought I knew better. I was wrong." "Yes, you were. Now go." Michael walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, I never wanted to kill you. I convinced myself it was necessary, but I never wanted it. I hope you believe that." "I don't know what I believe anymore," Vincent said. "But it doesn't matter now. Goodbye, Michael." Michael left. The door closed behind him. The room was silent except for the sound of breathing. Vincent turned to Johnny, Frank, and Anthony. "Get out. All of you. Go home. Tomorrow we'll discuss your new positions. Right now I don't want to look at you." They left quickly, grateful to escape. Now it was just Vincent, Marco, and Sarah. Vincent felt exhausted suddenly, as if all the adrenaline that had been sustaining him had drained away at once. He sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "You okay, boss?" Marco asked. "No," Vincent said honestly, "but I will be." Sarah put her phone away. The transmission was real, by the way. Everything's backed up, secured. If Michael tries anything, he won't. He's beaten, and he knows it. By tomorrow night, he'll be on a plane somewhere. Vincent looked up at her. "Thank you. For everything. You saved my life, prevented a war, and probably saved the organization. I owe you more than I can repay. Just keep the peace," Sarah said. "That's payment enough. And maybe think about that succession plan you mentioned. Not because of this, but because it's the right thing to do. Build something clean for your daughter. Let this world end with you." Vincent considered her words. She was right. This life, this world, it had given him power and money, but it had also cost him his wife, nearly cost him his life, and had corrupted people he cared about. Sophia deserved better. She deserved a father who could walk away from this before it destroyed him completely. "I'll think about it," Vincent said. "Seriously this time." Sarah nodded. "That's all I ask." They left the warehouse together, stepping out into the cold November night. The confrontation was over. The conspiracy had been exposed. Michael was finished. But Vincent knew this wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning, a chance to rebuild, to restructure, to create something different. The question was whether he had the courage to actually do it. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the warehouse. 3 days that felt like 3 months. Vincent stood in his office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, looking out at the city sprawled below him. The morning sun painted the buildings in shades of gold and amber, and from this height New York looked peaceful, orderly, beautiful even. Down there, life continued. People went to work, grabbed coffee, complained about the subway, made plans for the weekend. Normal lives. Simple lives. Lives that didn't involve betrayal and conspiracy, and the constant calculation of who to trust. Vincent envied them. His office reflected his success. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, original artwork on the walls. Everything carefully chosen to project power and legitimacy. The import business that operated from this building was entirely legal, generating enough profit to satisfy any auditor. It was the foundation he'd built for Sophia's future, the clean money that would give her opportunities he'd never had. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Vincent called. Sarah Chen entered, dressed professionally in a navy blazer and slacks. She looked different from the waitress he'd met at Rosie's diner, more polished, more confident. But the sharp, observant eyes were the same. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti." "Sarah, please sit." Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." Vincent sat down, studying her. "I wanted to see you before you left. Make sure everything was settled. The payment was generous. More than generous." Sarah had received $200,000, 4 times what Michael had originally offered her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You saved my life. You prevented a war. There's no price tag on that, but I wanted to show my appreciation in a tangible way." Sarah nodded, accepting the gesture. "I appreciate it. The money will help me start fresh in Los Angeles. Clean slate, new clients, different challenges. When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning." Early flight. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Vincent had been in countless business meetings, negotiated deals worth millions, faced down rivals and law enforcement. But this conversation felt different, more personal, more real. "How are things here?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence. "With the organization?" Vincent sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Complicated. Michael left the country, Paris, last I heard. Johnny, Frank, and Anthony have been demoted, reassigned to positions where they can't cause damage. Some of the younger members have been promoted to fill the gaps. It's been an adjustment. And the Russos? Sent a representative. We had a conversation. They understood that their arrangement with Michael died when he left. We've agreed to maintain our current boundaries. No expansion, no conflicts. For now, it's stable. That's good. Is it?" Vincent stood and walked back to the window. "I spent 15 years building loyalty, creating structure, establishing trust. And in one afternoon I discovered it was all built on sand. The people I trusted most were planning to remove me. The organization I thought was solid was riddled with conspiracy." Sarah joined him at the window. "But you survived. And you handled it without unnecessary violence. That counts for something, does it? I let Michael walk away. Some people think that makes me weak. They're wondering if I've lost my edge, if I'm getting soft. Let them wonder. Strength isn't just about retaliation. Sometimes it takes more courage to show mercy than to show force. Sarah paused. Your daughter, Sophia, right? What does she think about all this? Vincent smiled slightly. She doesn't know the details. She knows there was some business trouble, some personnel changes. I keep her separate from this world as much as possible. She's studying business at NYU, wants to do something legitimate with her life. She's smart, ambitious, ethical, everything I should have been. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? Vincent turned to face her. I've spent my adult life building an empire on morally questionable foundations. I've hurt people, directly and indirectly. My wife died of stress-related illness. Stress that came from worrying about me, about what I do, about whether I'd come home each night. My daughter grew up with a father who had to lie about his business. That's not something to be proud of. Sarah was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. You can't change the past, but you can change the future. You mentioned succession planning during that meeting. Were you serious about that? Vincent walked back to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Sarah. Look at this. Sarah opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, business plans, financial projections. What am I looking at? A 5-year transition plan. I've been working on it since the warehouse meeting. Over the next 5 years, I'll gradually transfer control of the legitimate businesses to Sophia. She'll start as a junior executive, learn the operations, prove herself. The other operations, the ones that aren't legal, I'm going to phase them out. Some will be sold to people who can run them. Others will just be closed down. By the time Sophia takes over, everything will be clean. Sarah looked up, surprise evident on her face. You're serious about this? Completely serious. You asked me why I didn't let you die in that diner. You said you prevented my death to stop a cycle of violence. Well, I'm taking that lesson. I'm ending my own cycle. The one that started with my father and continued with me stops here. Sophia gets something better. That's actually remarkable. Sarah closed the folder and handed it back. But it won't be easy. People depend on the current structure. They make money from it. They won't want to see it end. I know. That's why it's a 5-year plan, not a 5-month plan. Gradual changes. Transitioning people to legitimate roles where possible. Compensating those who lose income. Making it worth their while to support the change rather than resist it. Vincent sat down again. Will everyone go along with it? Probably not. But I'm betting most will. And the ones who don't, well, they can go work for someone else. Sarah studied him with those sharp, analytical eyes. What changed? 3 days ago, you were fighting to maintain control. Now you're planning to give it up. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Michael said something during our confrontation. He said I'd been coasting on my father's reputation and old alliances. He meant it as an insult, but he was right. I've been maintaining a system I inherited rather than building something new. Something mine. Something I could actually be proud of. He looked at Sarah directly. You lost your brother to violence created by people like me. People fighting over territory and pride and power that ultimately doesn't matter. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want my daughter to inherit that legacy. I want to build something that matters. Something that creates value rather than just extracting it from others. That's a beautiful goal, Sarah said softly. But you know it won't redeem everything you've done, right? It won't bring back the people who were hurt along the way. I know. I'm not looking for redemption. I'm just looking for a better ending than the one I was heading toward. Vincent smiled sadly. My wife, Maria, before she died, she made me promise to be better. To think about Sophia's future, not just the organization's future. I promised her I would. Then I spent 3 years failing to keep that promise. Maybe this is my chance to finally honor it. Sarah nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you can do it. You're smart enough, disciplined enough, and you have good people around you. Marco seems absolutely loyal. Build on that. Find others you can trust, verify that trust, and create something sustainable. Will you help? The question came out before Vincent had fully thought it through. Sarah looked surprised. Help how? Consulting. Not constant, just occasional. You'll be in Los Angeles, building your business. But every few months, maybe you could review my security, my operations, provide an outside perspective. Someone who isn't invested in the current structure, who can tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Vincent leaned forward. I'll pay your standard rates plus travel. No strings attached, just honest assessment. Sarah considered this. You're asking me to be your conscience. I'm asking you to be an objective observer who keeps me accountable to the goals I've set. Is that something you'd be willing to do? Let me think about it. I'll give you an answer before I leave tomorrow. Fair enough. They talked for another hour. About the transition plan, about security measures, about how to identify trustworthy people in an untrustworthy business. Sarah shared insights from her FBI years, patterns she'd observed about how organizations succeeded or failed in major transitions. Vincent found himself valuing her perspective more than he'd expected. She didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. She told him what he needed to hear. That was rare and precious. As the conversation wound down, Sarah stood to leave. I should go. Still have packing to finish. Vincent walked her to the door. Thank you again. For everything. You've already thanked me, and paid me extremely well. Sarah smiled. But you're welcome. Just promise me you'll actually follow through on this plan. Don't let it become something you talk about, but never execute. I promise. I'm putting it in writing, sharing it with my lawyer and my daughter. That makes it real. Makes it harder to back out of. Sarah extended her hand. Then good luck, Vincent. I hope it works out the way you want it to. Vincent shook her hand, then impulsively pulled her into a brief embrace. You saved my life. More than that, you gave me a reason to change it. I won't forget that. Sarah returned the embrace, then stepped back. Don't be a stranger. Even if you don't hire me as a consultant, let me know how things turn out. I'm invested in this story now. I want to see the happy ending. You'll get regular updates, I promise. She left, and Vincent returned to his desk. He opened the folder with the transition plan and reviewed it again. 5 years. It seemed both impossibly long and frighteningly short. His phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Lunch today. My treat. Want to tell you about my marketing project. Vincent smiled and typed back. Absolutely. Noon at that Italian place you like. Can't wait to hear about it. Another text came through. This one from Marco. Security review complete. Building is clear. All protocols followed. And one from his lawyer. Reviewed the documents you sent. Solid plan. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss implementation timeline. The pieces were falling into place. The plan was becoming real. Vincent looked out at the city again. Somewhere down there, Sarah was preparing to start a new chapter in Los Angeles. Michael was probably doing the same in Paris. Johnny, Frank, and Anthony were adjusting to their reduced roles, deciding whether to earn back trust or move on. And Vincent was standing at a crossroads. One path led to continuing what he'd always done, maintaining power through the methods he knew. The other led to something different, something uncertain, something that required faith in a future he couldn't completely control. He thought about Maria, about the promise he'd made at her funeral. He thought about Sophia, about the life she deserved. He thought about Sarah's brother David, dying on a convenience store floor because of violence created by people exactly like Vincent. He thought about trust and loyalty, and the price of both. Then Vincent Moretti made his choice. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his senior leadership. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Mandatory attendance. We're going to discuss the future of this organization. Come prepared for major changes. The responses came quickly. Confirmations, questions, concerns. Vincent answered them all with the same message. Details tomorrow. This is important. Be there. He closed his laptop, straightened his desk, and prepared to leave for lunch with his daughter. As he walked to the elevator, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, not certainty, not confidence. Just hope that maybe, possibly he could build something better than what he'd inherited. That he could end the cycle rather than perpetuate it. That he could be the father Sophia deserved rather than the man circumstances had made him. The elevator descended 40 floors, carrying Vincent from his office to the street level, from the place of power to the place where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. When he stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cold November air hit him, but Vincent didn't mind. He pulled his coat tighter and started walking toward the restaurant where Sophia was waiting. Behind him, the building rose into the sky, a monument to what he'd built. Ahead of him, the street stretched toward an uncertain future, and Vincent Moretti walked forward, leaving the past where it belonged. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. I've thought about your offer. My answer is yes. I'll help you build something better. Talk soon. Vincent smiled and kept walking. The waitress had said, "Don't stand yet." But now, finally, it was time to stand. Time to move forward. Time to change. And Vincent Moretti was ready.